Hello and welcome to the Sits Insight Spotlight. I've got a very special guest. I'm very excited to have Benjamin Drury, aka the Culture Guy, with me. Hello, Ben.
Hi, James. How are you doing this morning?
Yes, I'm very good, thank you. You spoke at Sits. I think your presentation was brilliantly received. You can tell the
Thank you.
reaction of people and how they're buying into these ideas. Do you think overall that people are starting to understand teams, that they're starting to understand the importance of culture and that it's less of a soft skill now?
Business is slowly moving into a place where I think previously in the kind of 70s and 80s, it was all about production and actually making production efficient and ensuring that everything was done efficiently and in order in process. But we've moved away from kind of production more into people are your means of production, and people are irrational and they're emotional and they have issues and they don't get on sometimes. And in order to get the best out of your people, you need to build a culture where they can thrive. You need to build a space where they are happy to do the job they're doing, and that's how you get more productivity. And so I think people are starting to see how that works in the kind of modern world of business.
Within your organization, what are the warning signs that you probably need to do something about culture?
One of the key things is politics. We all talk about office politics. Everybody knows office politics exists. But if you're starting to feel there's too much politics, I wish people would just do their job, then the bottom line is people are pulling in different directions. And when you can nail down your culture effectively and your purpose, you eliminate people pulling in different directions. You might have disagreement and you might have what I call good conflict, where people have got the ability to disagree, but there's nothing hidden. There are no hidden agendas. People are doing it openly and having those conversations with a genuine desire to see success for the business.
You talked about at SITS the toxic atmosphere, but it's not about creating a bad atmosphere that makes it slightly unpleasant. There's a real empirical, strategic reason to consider this, isn't it? Because it stops people working and doing the things that they should be doing, doesn't it?
There was a study done, I think it finished in the mid-90s, by James Heskett and John Cotter. And they essentially looked at companies with really strongly defined culture and companies with weakly defined or not explicitly defined cultures. And what they discovered was companies with strongly defined cultures can increase revenue by 700%. So it's not just are people happy? I want to make people happy. I like to. Your revenue will go up because people will be more productive. It is a zero-sum game when you come down to it. Your bottom line will increase. Let me give you a couple of examples to start with, and then I will talk you through a process that I would usually take clients through. Because essentially what we've got to do is we've got to stop thinking of it about a big piece of work. It doesn't necessarily need to be a big piece of work. One or two small things can radically alter your culture and change your environment. And to explain what I mean, I worked with a company in London, a recruitment company in London. And they had grown to 20, 22 people, something like that. And the founders were just working so hard to keep control of the culture and organize stuff and control things. And the issue they had is that they had not explicitly defined what their culture was so that it could operate in their absence. So they didn't go on holiday. They couldn't go on kind of international business meetings to grow the company how they wanted to grow it, because they didn't want to leave the office for more than a day. We did essentially two things, and it was really simple. And to be honest, it cost them nothing, because with all my clients, I do an hour and a half where I sit down and talk them through some things they can do. They implemented that. It had a massive change on their culture, and they didn't need me, which is great. No, I'm not, it doesn't bother me. But what they did was they implemented two things. First of all, they gave their staff unlimited holidays. And secondly, they made the workplace more flexible, so people could come in when they like. And what that did over the 3 months they trialed it is they had the best quarter in the company's 6-year history. The final month was the best month in the company's history. Productivity went up by 40%. They have now been on, I think, 3 international business trips to generate more business, and the company has run really well while they're away. But more importantly, and this is what most people get scared of, the number of holidays taken in the first quarter was proportional to the number of holidays taken in the first quarter of the previous year. So
Wow.
even giving away holidays does not mean people are going to take more holiday.
Wow.
But what it does do is it did a really simple thing in their case. The one thing that they'd forgotten to do is tell the people who work for them that they trust them as adults.
I remember you saying at SITS that there are lots of companies that get very good at sales and marketing and HR and all of the process type stuff, but they're not healthy. They're smart, but they're not healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That plugs into this, doesn't it? Because that stuff, you wouldn't perhaps see it on a sheet of paper that the culture's broken, because all the processes seem fine.
You don't need vast amounts of data to know that people aren't happy and there's politics going on and you're being frustrated in trying to do your job. The only real competitive advantage organizations have now, to me, is defining what their purpose and values are, which defines their culture. So, for example, have you ever flown Southwestern Airlines in the States?
No.
Well, they have a value. One of their values is fun, because travel is really boring and they want to make it a little bit less boring, a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting, so people aren't so miserable when they're traveling, which is fair enough. And when they give the safety announcements and when the cabin crew give announcements on planes, they have a little bit of a laugh and say things like, in the event we land on water, we'll be coming around with cocktails and napkins, things like that. Just A, it makes people listen, but B, it just cheers them up a little bit when they've been waiting to get on a plane for an hour. But one woman took an exception to that, and she wrote to the chairman, who was Herb Kelleher at the time, and complained and said, look, these are safety announcements. You need to take them seriously. I'm really quite upset that you don't take safety seriously, and your cabin crew are all messing around and having a laugh. It seems like they're not professional. And he wrote back a nice little letter that said, we'll miss you. It's like, if that's not the way you want to travel, that is who we are as an organization. And that differentiated Southwestern from every other airline.
Yes.
He was prepared to lose a customer to hold on to that differentiation. For the last 70, 80 odd years, we've been making everything more efficient. Everybody knows how to do it. Any MBA will teach you how to do your finances, your IT, and everything else. Now, none of that is a secret. But this bit is the bit that, when you nail down who you are and what you stand for, nobody else can copy that.
There's a lot to take away there, isn't there, from an IT team that's worked that way for a long time. Have you got any advice on how they can kind of start to shift that thinking?
There are 4 things that I go through with clients, and you need to consider all 4 of these things. And if you get on my website at thecultureguy.co.uk, you can look up the one framework. It's on there. It gives you kind of descriptions of each of the sections. The 4 things you need to do is essentially, you need to define what you stand for. Who are you and what is it you do? What is the value you are adding to your clients? And defining your purpose. And that includes your values, how you're going to behave. What is really important? What are the lines you won't cross for business? The next thing is, do you have the people to execute that? Like we mentioned before, if you get the wrong people on your team, your culture is going to coalesce to something you don't like. So you have to get people that share those values and want to kind of deliver what you've set out as your purpose. And the last 2 parts are all about implementing it with those people. And these are the 2 parts that a lot of organizations miss. And this is where I think people can start to have an impact in changing their culture. And that is, does the way you talk to each other and communicate through your marketing match what you've said your purpose is and your values are? If it doesn't, your customers are going to notice.
Yeah.
And the last one is very, very similar, but it's all about processes. It's all about processes and procedures and policies. Does your processes, your procedures, your policies, the way you want to do business, reinforce what you've said your purpose is and how you want to behave and how you want to treat people? Or does it cut across that? And so if you start to look at those places, you'll start to see areas where that doesn't match up. For example, if you are trying to get collaboration between people, what are your rewards? How do you reward people? Do you reward them individually or do you reward them as a team? Because if you're rewarding them individually, you're not going to get collaboration.
It's really obvious.
And, well, it is. But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how often things like that happen in slightly more sophisticated and subtle ways in organizations. Yeah. And I've seen one organization talk about flexible working, and yet every new starter gets a desk and a desktop. I'm like, well, how am I've got to work here at this desk. What?
Yeah.
It's like, to me, it's so obvious.
Yeah.
So, they started giving laptops, and all of a sudden the atmosphere changed.
Changes, makes sense. Ben, we're
And
going to leave it there. That's some fascinating stuff, and I do urge the Sits Insight readers to really have a look at what you're doing and start to think about that culture, because it's the sort of elephant in the room, I think, for a lot of teams and organizations, isn't it? Like you said earlier, there's a problem, but you're not really facing it. So, and the fact that you're saying it doesn't have to be monumentous, there are simple things that you
absolutely,
can change are really
it's
good.
interesting you say that, because when people ask me what I do, I always say I kill elephants, and they look at me askance. I'm like, the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. It's all right. No real elephants.
I'm not sure whether that's better to say that at the beginning of the conversation or the end. So
I always like to throw that in just to get that reaction, because then they remember you.
Fantastic. Good. Well, Ben, thanks ever so much for your time, and everyone go and have a look at the website, and thanks again.
It's really great to talk to you, James. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ben. Bye.